Hey, what's going on, people? You are now listening to the Chieftains podcast. This is Chief
The
X,
Chieftains. This is Chief Meta.
Chief Drea.
and tonight we're going to be discussing Hidden Colors 5. Shout out to Tariq Nasheed. Also, systemic racism or racist and discriminatory hiring practices within corporate America, black spending patterns, the Jordan narrative, how that needs to die, and also conflict marketing. Let's go ahead and get into it, the Chieftains. Let's go. So for Hidden Colors 5, here are my overall thoughts about that particular documentary. Uh, it was a very informative documentary. As an educated individual, I will start off by saying this, that documentaries may contain primary sources, but they're often selecting, framing, interpreting them, and so are not considered to be primary sources as a whole. This isn't to detract from HC5, Hidden Colors 5, but to encourage people to consistently find the primary sources and references for themselves to not be misled and use their critical thinking skills. Now, back to my review and actually my overall reaction to Hidden Colors 5. The Art of Black Warfare, which I watched last month and also again recently to make sure I properly digested the various points made within the film.
Yep.
The documentary is broken down into 7 chapters exploring the various areas of how warfare is waged on Black society from a global standpoint. And those 7 chapters were 1, the art of African warfare; 2, the consumption of Blackness. That was very nefarious. And 3, psychological attacks on Blackness; 4, biological attacks on Blackness; 5, sexual attacks on Blackness; 6, how entertainment is weaponized; and lastly, sexual attacks on Blackness. Hidden Colors opened up with how African war culture was developed. History always showed Africa as the loser, but what isn't discussed is how African people have always been welcoming and an embracing people. So Jabari Asaj, I may be pronouncing his name incorrectly, forgive me, it's not an era of the heart, but it's more so of the mind, stated, Kemet was the breadbasket of the region that so much food was successfully produced that they could have a standing army, which meant that not everyone needed to be in an army, that some people could be artists, basket weavers, etc. So Tamari, or actually ancient Kemet, was attacked in 4200 BC by the Europeans, in which Africans ended up winning that particular battle. I enjoyed the part about Hannibal, which is something I already knew about being a Black man, obviously not a European. Often the stories of African culture gets whitewashed to make a culture of Black people seem weak and dumb. How could Hannibal have been a European and have trained elephants? Think about that for a second. This aspect of the documentary goes into depth involving some of Africa's greatest war strategists, tacticians, and war heroes. The documentary does a great job in showing the various ways Blacks or Africans are under attack from psychological warfare, cannibalism, etc., and also down to our diet and also health. Now, on the topic of diet, I would say that I didn't necessarily agree with the push as veganism as the only way to go and the only righteous way. But I do agree that there are plenty of diets out there that Black people can look to as well as incorporating an active lifestyle to take control of our holistic selves. I also didn't agree with the push to dissuade Black people from getting vaccines. There are certain vaccines that are necessary. Now, I would agree that you don't have to get the flu shot. However, there's no excuse for your child to have the measles, mumps, and other preventative diseases out there with the medical advances we have today. Another aspect of the documentary that I didn't agree with was the attempt to equate sugar addiction with crack addiction. Basically saying sugar is exactly like cocaine or crack in terms of the addictive qualities, which, according to research, is not true. One is behavioral based and the other substance based. So Hidden Colors 5 does a great job with the cinematography, historical analysis, and commentary. Overall, I would say, or I would give Hidden Colors 5 a 4.5 out of 5. What do you all think? What were some aspects of Hidden Colors 5 that you liked or didn't like?
Interesting. So I'll go into my thoughts on Hidden Colors because I watched it a few times myself, and Tariq Nasheed definitely did a great job discussing the holistic war that's going on with Black folks. And so pretty much I would have liked to have seen more discussion on like the transatlantic, slave trade. How did that happen? How our own ancestors sold their family members to Europeans. And I know we have to, go back to the whole history of Kemet, but I think sometimes we like glorify that and we don't talk about more on, all right, what's the evil side to it, hence why we're here in America. And we get stuck on that as well. I also like when they talked about the organ trafficking, sex trafficking, human trafficking. Over 1.5 million Black men are missing, and I put in an article that you can go check out at the New York Times. And also, too, Black women are missing as well because we have we're missing due to mass incarceration, organ trafficking, and mass incarceration. So that's why I always say, like, we have to be careful of the places we frequent because, we have a target on our back. And knowing that our organs are keeping so many folks who are non-Black alive is very interesting. I like how they pointed that out because we're always at the mercy or consumption of others. And I think a lot of times we don't have that discussion as well. And I also talked about I threw this in there real quick, the notice of like sexual attack on Black folks. If you all notice, like in the industry, like I said, I'm a big hip hop head. Just look at mainstream music. You have to be a different sexual orientation, right, to get ahead. Like, the dude Little Nas X, it's like, okay, also I'm coming out to be X, Y, and Z. So there's this big sexual attack on not just us as adults, but also our babies out here. And it's like, hey, it's okay to be something other than if you want to make it in the corporate world, if you want to make it into the industry or, entertainment. I agree with you. She asked when you talked about the veganism, like we can eat healthy without being a vegan as well, because we're at an all-time warfare and we have to understand that, we can change our diets. That doesn't mean we have to go and be a vegan or a vegetarian because maybe your certain parts of your genetics can't handle plant-based diets, and I don't think we have conversations around that as well. I do agree with Queen of Food, but I have followed her for some time now, talk about how Black women are suffering and hemorrhaging based on, she didn't mention environment. We got to think about the environments we live in. We have environmental racism. We also have on the job racism. We also have trying to be everything to everyone. And so we have to check that because a lot of times we are diagnosed with fibroids, PCOS, endometriosis, and more things. And I believe that we can be holistic because we need to be whole people if we're going to continue the fight for reparations for our justice claim. Another thing I want to mention, I like how David Banner like dropped knowledge on, folks talking about white Jesus. And also too said that maybe we have to drop white Jesus in the pastor. Because a lot of times, what education are you getting from your pastor besides building him a mega church or making the first lady, wear more Versace or whatever the case is? So, we need to also have those conversations about religion and like being on code, because if we're not like, if we're just like, oh, I got to listen to my pastor or my pastor, how can I be on code with the ultimate goal of obtaining reparations, being repaired, also too, making sure that our generation are being repaired and also that our lineage is being repaired as well. And a lot of times when you are worshiping white Jesus and you're like, oh, okay, do I want to look like that image? And then we're like, okay, how are we going to fight against white supremacy if we're just worshiping someone who looks different from us? So that was my take from Hidden Colors. I really love, I watched all the Hidden Colors, really love the discussion. And I love the different people that he bring on there to bring a different perspective as well. So that's my takeaway from Hidden Colors.
That's deep. It's deep. Now, on this topic of racism, or rather, actually, let's go back to that. We were talking about speaking on HC5. What about like organ trafficking, sex trafficking, human trafficking, and all that, right? So over 1.5 million Black men are missing. There was a New York Times article, and I think you may have mentioned that. 1.5 million are missing. In terms of warfare, I love how the documentary touched on that, like how even with our homeless, because they're not oftentimes included within that data. And then you have just people just turn up missing.
Mm-hmm.
And then now we can tie this into also Black women. Um, Now, what are some ways that Black women can protect themselves from being victims of organ trafficking?
I really believe I'm a firm believer on protecting. I always say protecting that. You have to protect yourself. So whether that means you have to take a self-defensive class, you have to go to the gun range to learn how to shoot, which I'm a big advocate for. Getting gun permits, owning a gun, going to the gym. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that's basic 101. Taking a stroll around your neighborhood. How can you like, okay, for 30 minutes, I need to move my body, because that's how also too, when you move your body, you're also not necessarily broken up, but you have the strength and endurance if you gotta run away, if you gotta, really give somebody the business. I think that will also too combat organ trafficking, as well as having like a accountability partner, like a homegirl, like, girl, we gotta like get in shape, because like if someone's trying to target us, we gotta know how to, do the right move so we won't go missing and then our organs are being missing. And be with the right kind of people, because people can set you up too. So that's all about having discernment. People can set you up like the young lady in Chicago had got set up with, in that hotel situation. And you have to have discernment, but you also too have to like protect yourself by any means necessary. And I'm a big believer in that. And some people may be like, oh my God, like we supposed to be nonviolent. But if someone's coming for you, you need to protect yourself.
Right.
It's either you or no.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
Yeah, you or them. Now, moving forward with like the racism and racist hiring practices, and I know you as a professional involving career coaching, what are some things that like you notice when it comes down to like, for example, HR and like resumes? What exactly are they looking at? Because from what I've been reading is that over the years is that there definitely is racism when it comes down to um, various managers looking at the resumes, applications, and whatnot,
Ethnic
down
names
to.
being thrown in the trash.
Yes. Yes.
What are y'all thoughts about this?
Um,
And as it pertains to like even when it comes to the racial, or rather the inequality, wealth gap and income gap.
Definitely what Chief Meta just mentioned, like ethnic sounding names. I, for instance, like I said, I've been on both sides. I've been on the hiring side. I work with college students now. Also, too, I've been on the side in which, have to get hired. Definitely they're going to look at your name. They're going to look at your address. And let's say if you live in a district in which is a quote unquote mixed neighborhood, and if it's at a certain income tax bracket, they're going to be like, how this person with this ethnic sounding name can live over there. Then sometimes they'll invite you in so they can kind of ask questions around that. Not pertaining to your skills or qualifications, but like, how did you get in that neighborhood? Also too, I'm noticing a lot of people whitewashing their resumes.
Yeah.
So if my name is Jamila, I'm gonna go in there and say, oh, my name is Jamie. Or if my name is Jamila, let's say Jamila Jane, I'm gonna do J Jane Smith. You see what I'm saying? So like I can take away who I am, whitewash who I am, so I can get in the door at least. And then when they see you coming in the door, they're like, hold up, I'm looking for a Jamie, and here comes Jamila. And you're gonna have to clarify that in the interview process. Like, okay, what is your actual name? And I don't know if you all read about that. The Google engineer has said that their Google hires the whitest black folks.
Yeah.
I remember that.
And pretty much they said, it's a quote from Bria Sullivan. She's an engineer at Google. She said, this is the problem. She says that Google hires the whitest black candidate. She says they hire someone who's exactly like them, but black. That's a hard pill to swallow. So it's like, okay, you have to sound a certain way. You gotta do a lot of code switching, right? Also, too, you gotta hang out with them. You gotta do some things. It's that whole sexual attack. You may have to do some things to get in. So getting in where you don't fit in at. So that's my stance on when it comes to the racist hiring workplace, because it happens all the time. I see people whiten their name, and when they get there they're like, hold on, what's going on with this? So what you guys think about that, the practices of being
Well,
discriminated against at the door?
well, I'm reading about this right now, and the National Bureau of Economic Research did a study, and they said that white names with the same resume gets a higher, a 30% more callbacks than African Americans, and applicants living in better neighborhoods, so to speak, receive more callbacks. But interestingly, this effect does not differ by race, because better in other neighborhoods, just like it ties into what you're saying, they're the most white black people. So they can kill two birds with one stone. I can get somebody that's near my socioeconomic status, that's within another demographic. So I'm hitting that quota in that form. Or on the other side of it, they're also going toward these neighborhoods they call empowerment zones. And I remember this was back in 2002 when I was working for this telemarketing company, and I lived on campus, and I was on the borderline of a hood that I used to be around and I used to live in, actually. And they said, well, oh, you're in an empowerment zone. I was like, in my head, I said, no, I'm not. I live on the campus side. What are y'all talking about? But I was just
Mm-hmm.
kind of looking at her. She only said that because I'm black, for real, for real. So it's odd, because I definitely lived a block away from campus, and my apartment complex was full of students. So it's kind of crazy that I qualified for them getting that empowerment zone tax break because they hired me.
Wow.
And there's okay, let me see if I can find that too. Look at me being all late on the notes. I know there was a there was definitely another situation, and I've personally experienced this, where a temp company in Chicago was practicing positive discrimination towards recently arrived Latino people and barring black people out of employment. Let me find this mouse right here. Got it. Okay, yep, here it is. Black workers suit accuses job agency of favoring Hispanic applicants. Group of African American workers filed a class action lawsuit in federal court on Tuesday against a nationwide job placement agency and several of its clients, accusing them of discriminating against black applicants by favoring Hispanic applicants. It was filed in the United States District Court for Northern District of Illinois. It was MVP Staffing. It had 8 counts of racial discrimination based on the operations of its office in Cicero. And they didn't return any comments. So, and the companies were.
Wow.
Oh, my bad.
And if you guys,
I was going to just name them. I was going to put their name just so people
no, go
could know.
ahead.
Personnel Staffing Group, Seger Dog Group, Mercury Plastics Incorporated, Jet Litho Color, Penray Companies Incorporated, West Rock Consumer Packaging Group, AGI Media, Lawrence Foods Incorporated, and the Blommer Chocolate Company. Yeah. Yeah.
And you said that was in Cicero? And they're notorious for being very
Of
they're
course,
notorious
their
for being
police
very
are
racist out there.
people want to talk about the gang members and the gang culture in Chicago, but they seem to forget about the Ambrose and the Gaylords and those white gangs that existed, because that's the Cicero Police Department. No, people change their lives a little bit and put on a uniform. But that is Cicero. All right.
Okay. With that being said, so let's tie this into stratification economics. And Darity was saying that Sandy Darity, he said that stratification economics is an approach that emphasizes relative position rather than absolute position. What's relevant to relative position are two considerations. One, a person's perception of how the social group or groups to which they belong have standing vis-a-vis other groups that could be conceived
Ooh.
of as being rival groups. Now, it's an interesting issue as to who constitutes groups that are viewed as rivalrous or oppositional in some sense. But the first thing that individuals value is the superior position for the groups with which they identify. The second thing that they value is the superior position relative to other members of their own group. So, what do you all think about that?
Hmm. I'm still processing it. Whew. The thing that stands out to me, I'm reading it over. The first thing that individuals value is a superior position for the groups which they identify, which means if I identify with them, I'm comfortable with them, so they're gonna get the first preference for me to hire. So they pretty much have to share like possibly, like values, what I look like, what I'm comfortable with. So that stood out to me the most. So you're already kind of out the door if someone already have that mentality of hiring. I want to be comfortable and be surrounded by people who identify what I look like, what I stand for. So it's they're individualizing it, not looking at it from the skills and qualifications perspective. So you're already discriminated, based off of that.
This is true, and even when you bring in dichotomies like somebody identifying with more than one group, like in the case of the Cuban American individual who happened to be black, that's the leader of the Proud Boys right now. He can kind of gerrymander
Hmm.
himself, even though his main identity and what he identifies with as a whole is not his appearance. His first identification is the West. He thinks of the West. He thinks of his compatriots because he lives in Miami. So most of the other people that are described as Cuban American do not look like him, but he fits into that demographic because of culture. So he wants that culture that he
Hmm.
identifies with, which are people that left Cuba to live a Western life. Bless you. To live a Western life and engage in market capitalism at the expense of other groups that may be poor. You know, it's just a strange dichotomy. But he's heading a group that
Hmm.
stands juxtaposed to him, even though we mirror him. So it's kind of odd.
Right.
He definitely wants a superior position for that, and he has there's a whole group that he represents that also feels the same way
Hmm.
about him.
Right.
Hmm. Right.
It's a bit odd.
Now, like to further expound on this, and I'm reading directly from a particular source here, and they said that economic research and the preference of discrimination in employment has focused largely on black, white, and male female earnings and occupational disparities. The position typically taken by economists is that some part of the racial or gender gap in earnings or occupations is due to average group differences in productivity, linked characteristics, and human capital gap, and some part is due to average group differences in treatment, a discrimination gap. The more of the gap that can be explained by human capital differences, the easier it becomes to assert that labor markets function in a non-discriminatory manner. Any remaining racial or gender inequality in employment outcomes must be due to differences between blacks and whites or between men and women that arose outside the labor market. Um, Now, when we look at all these different factors here, including like education, experience, job tenure, region of the particular country, and other dummy variables, for example, like race and gender, um, I believe that what's going on here is that when we really sum it up, it comes down to basically that white people are trying to protect whiteness, right? So this goes through, like, we're no longer talking about now a theory of racism, right? We're talking about the practice of racism. And this is what so many of our compatriots do not understand, is that we're not saying that this is based off of a feeling. Like, no, these are the legit effects of your quote unquote your biases against a certain group of people whom you say you all need to pull yourselves up by your bootstraps and just work hard.
Right.
Meanwhile, we've been the boots, we've been the bootstraps, we've been the socks, we've been the soles of your feet. And every time we try to get a step ahead, once again, we encounter a certain obstacle. Now it comes down to, oh, it's your name.
Right.
Oh, I thought, I wasn't expecting you
Your
when you
hair
came in
is
the
a little
door. I was
bit
expecting
too.
someone else.
It's a little bit too.
Yeah.
Your hair is another obstacle.
Right.
It's a little too urban. I thought this was the land of the free, though. Interesting, right?
Right.
So, as a group of people, when we dive into this whole discriminatory practices, it's so interesting that now that we're on this topic, that okay, now we can talk about, now when it comes to gender, like the difference between now black women, black men. When it comes to this, that black women oftentimes, okay, they can fulfill a direct quota, all right, when it comes to that minority
Right.
quota, right? So not only are you black, you're a female. So guess
Exactly.
what? I can get 2 for 1.
Yep.
Or if they get,
You know, y'all niggas need to, step
not
up
only
and
this,
bring
hold
something
on.
to the table. You know what I mean? Like, it's real.
A second,
But that's
they could also
Right.
they could also hire a black gay man and say, "Oh wait, it's you, the straights, who are a problem because these black gay men are
Yep.
outperforming you in every life metric, and they're being doubly discriminated against because
Exactly.
they're homosexual and they're black. So, what do you have to say to that?"
Yep.
And it's like this. It's like you can just look at it on both. You're trying to
Right.
fill 2 quotas. You're trying to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, and you know that these people allegedly won't be a threat to you in the office, which isn't true.
Right.
Right. Exactly.
So now now moving forward to now we look at the unemployment data. Now I pulled out the BLS data, and okay, so when we look at the BLS data, it would appear that African Americans had high unemployment rates, starting with President Obama. This was between 09, all right, and starting in 09, between 12.7% and 60%. Now moving forward under President Trump, it would appear that African Americans are doing well with unemployment at 5%. Is this true? What does this mean to you as a black man and as a black woman? So we look at the data starting from 09,
Right.
like January 1st, 09 to now. Okay, so January 1st, 2009 was like 12.7%. And it went up, though, like under Obama, to like 16 something percent. It's very interesting that we love to say that Obama did something for black people, but mind you, we had some of the highest unemployment rates under Obama.
Yeah.
But when this data here is very misleading. You look at 2019, though, we're sitting back in August was at 5% of the share. But what about the people who probably fell out of the unemployment situation entirely?
Right.
What do you all think about it?
So I was gonna say I had jot down in something quick. So remember we was talking about the 1.5 black men are missing, those incarcerated. The jobs are also being fulfilled behind the bars, in which are getting like 5 cents an hour. I'm just saying, and also too, another factor to it, people got to work 2-3 jobs to make a full time job and full time pay, and a lot of people are just giving up period, and hence since we see so many articles on the rise of entrepreneurship, and we also too have to look at it from a different perspective. So it's going back to that holistic perspective, as I mentioned before, is that okay, if you with a black partner, spouse, whoever the case is, how are you gonna tell your man, oh, you being lazy, and he's making, let's say, 30,000 a year, you're making 50,000 a year, and we got to look at it from a different lens at that point. And I think a lot of black women don't understand that. It's like, okay, first of all, we have 1.5 black men that's missing, whatever, that looks like. They're not going to make that much money. Also, too, we always talk about, oh, well, the pay rate is different. We're the lowest paid, and yeah, we're the highest educated, but at the same time, too, the income is held in households.
Mm.
And if your partner is unemployed, what's that looking like for you? Maybe you got to pick up another job, or maybe they just checked out, or you're just checked out, period, for looking for jobs, because you're, once again, going back to what we discussed, you're being discriminated from the get go because of your name, your address, your education, whatever the case is. So I don't think we look at it from that whole perspective. We just look at, oh, well, you're unemployed, but it's like, what's the factors of the unemployment? And if it went low as 5%, because like I said, people have to work multiple jobs just to sustain their
People might
life
not
in
even have
America.
transportation to do so in the first place. That's also another factor, depending on the city they're in. If you're in a
Mm-hmm.
place like Kansas City, especially in the black areas, they said that's the worst public transportation in North America to have. Most of the employment is not within the metro, the center metro, or within the bus line that they have. It's outside, on the outskirts. So there's not really a way for these people to get from point A to point B to obtain gainful employment in the first
Right.
place. They're forced to.
Yeah.
Right.
And speaking of transportation, though, this leads into a different area of the conversation, but probably like a subtopic. But other than that, like, okay, unemployment data, right? Okay, I fall out now because I don't qualify for unemployment, or I just said screw it entirely. Now I got the gig economy. I've got Uber, Lyft, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I can do some other things now to put food on the table, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of the societal pressure to attain said American dream. Now I had to do something. And so you can easily inflate the numbers to mean something that it really isn't.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you say 5% unemployment for African Americans, but when we look at it, a lot of the different people that I ran into who are ADOS, they probably hadn't worked for a year,
Mm-hmm.
but they've been doing other things. They were doing Uber, they were doing Lyft.
Right.
It might have been working part time, but yet they still don't qualify for unemployment.
Mm.
You see? You
Mm-hmm.
see how it can look real good because you're working a part-time job, but you may not necessarily
Mm,
qualify for
nor do you
unemployment
Right.
because
qualify
of the
for
hours you
any
work.
social aids
Exactly.
because of the hours you work.
Mm.
Yep.
Hmm.
Exactly.
You see?
Yeah.
So the data can be mad misleading, and then people can be like, well, Trump did this when really it had nothing to do with it. The entire
Exactly.
system
And
does
we're
not give
not
a
even
damn
speaking
about
on, and
you,
this is
brother and
just
sister.
theoretical. What are
Yeah.
some of these welfare to work programs that people may or may not be utilizing? What if they're actually counting what they're giving people, which is barely considered employment? I mean, they do make you work, but they don't really pay you much at all. And they're counting those people as
Mm-hmm.
employed,
Right.
even though they can't. They're not making anywhere near minimum wage at all.
So here's the second question that I got. Since jobs are discriminating, then what policies should we be supporting or rather be working to get put on the table to
I
better
think we should
protect ourselves?
fight for things similar to
Mm.
certain Native Americans, how they have hiring preferences near their reservation. Well, I think we should have hiring preference
Mhm.
near where we live. If you've been checking black on the census and posting that, like if during your employment history, we go through your records and it's been saying black this long, then you should get hiring preference if you're qualified, you know.
Yeah,
See
I agree.
what else?
Mhm.
I would love to also, um, definitely review who's in charge of hiring,
Ooh,
Yes,
right? There needs to be more ADOS,
that's a
foundational
good
Black
one.
Americans in these different situations where
Yes.
they're in charge of hiring and looking at their resumes. Because a lot of times, especially with some Black women and also
yes.
Black men, we're going to be more sensitive to ethnic sounding names.
True.
We're going to look more towards what? The qualifications of said
Right.
individuals. Now, I'm in favor of supporting policies that say, hey, we can definitely revamp affirmative action. Why not even look at the Civil Rights Act of 1866?
Yes.
Look at that too as a way to protect not only contracting but expand it to include various hiring practices. That's just my
Think
opinion on that. I'm not sure how you all feel about that.
I think I agree with you. Because when I go into certain places, and I'm going to be completely honest, and I get highly offended and pissed off when you see the folks who are hiring or quote unquote the director of diversity and inclusion office or center, they're white
due to their
women because
gender,
they're also counted as
even though
for
they're the
affirmative
majority.
action as well. Yes. Exactly. And I think we should also be a protective class because if we were first forcibly made to come over here and built this country for free 99, we should have been a protective class and we should have a lot more benefits. We should have our own laws and legislation like Native Americans do. And also, too, we need to look at this at will employment. At will is like, your employer can get rid of you at any time. Does that mean you're going to get a severance package? You probably won't. Depends on your state. And we also need to know employment law. A lot of times we don't know our rights or even responsibilities as employees of a company because we're just signing paperwork. We're just like, oh yeah, I'm agreeing because you're just so happy to get a job. But we also have rights and responsibilities as well that we don't know about. And sometimes people don't take it to the EEOC, the Equal Employment Officer, because majority of times, in my experience, they're white folks and they looking like, well, they didn't do anything wrong. And you do have a whole case that you documented yourself. And it's like, yeah, I've been discriminated against. So these laws and legislation should be looked at and revamped. And we should have more ADOS folks in there that have the knowledge and the capability to make decisions as well when it comes to hiring practices and also staying on your job and being a protective class.
To add to that, I think concepts like empowerment zones shouldn't be gamed by jobs to where they can use that for a tax break. Rather than that, why don't they have a quota where management, a certain amount of management actually has to come from said empowerment zone so they can combat adverse hiring practices, or somebody from HR, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, facts. I think right here we can actually take a quick break, and so that way, whatever you need to handle, go ahead and handle. So,
Take a quick
how about we
reset.
go ahead and do that? Okay, now we're back. We're back. We're back. We're back. Now we're going to dive into this topic involving the Jordan narrative in black spinning patterns. Um, now, there's been so much conversation around Jordans, and just recently in the ADOS group, the main group there, this came up: the Michael Jordan tequila, how he partnered with four other NBA owners to launch Sincoro. And here's what I have to say about that is that I really like, especially in the ADOS group, the main group,
Mhm.
I think that many people should not be allowed in that group
Mhm.
on Facebook, especially if they haven't read the data or any of the information about solidarity, that tone, etc. And I've been noticing this. One of the comments made in our group is that, oh, they are the main consumer of his shoes, broke as fuck, but wearing $200 pair of Jordans. And my brother, Chief Meta, said that's actually not true.
Mhm.
And it isn't true. Like when you look at the data and other comps like this, for example. And I what I did was I did a search on Facebook, like Jordan, like black people in Jordans, basically.
Mhm.
And this is by another sister. What could black people do with $1.4 trillion? Mind you, you're basing this information off of Nielsen ratings, but $1.4 trillion if they didn't spend it on holidays, Jordans, alcohol, hair weaves, jewelry, and car rims, etc. What could we be by now if we stop spending on frivolous things and place our money in the black communities? Another comment, Dr. Boyce Watkins, Air Jordans create trade deficit. First of all, what is this nigga talking about?
Mhm.
But other than that, I want to hear you guys comments involving this whole Jordan narrative that if you niggas stop buying Jordans, that somehow we will be better off economically and that we can close this racial wealth gap. What do you all think about this shit?
I thought Jordan Gold Chains was living it up. One of my favorite lines from my hip hop artist. But anyways, yeah, I'm just so sick of that whole narrative of like if you just stop buying Jordans or if you just stop buying coffee, whatever the case is, you could save more money, you could live a better life. But the data has shown improve over and over again. That's not true. You guys go look up the Solidarity, the Duke equity PDF file that he wrote about, closing the wealth gap. I think we've been hearing this narrative since, oh my God, I'll say the 80s. Um, and there's so much like, if we bank with black banks, if we do this, we're gonna close the wealth gap.
Yeah.
But this whole Jordan thing has been an interesting topic on top of like
Ooh.
the iPhone, right? If y'all stop standing in line, if you stand in line to vote, then
Right,
y'all
right,
can
right.
like, switch the
Wow.
game up. And we hear that theory as well. But when you go
Not
look
at
in
all.
those lines,
Stop buying pride.
I don't see
Nope.
I don't see myself staying in line. I don't see y'all staying in line because we're too busy trying to figure out how to, make it for the day. We're trying to figure out how to, get a job. We're trying to figure out how to
If
just
anybody's
survive
aligned,
being ADOS. So that's the problem I have.
like if anybody's aligned, if it's
No, go
us
ahead. I'm
aligned,
done.
it's gonna be the people that are being hired for Google, or there are people with channels on YouTube, or it's high school students. Like when I was younger, it was certain people from school, it was certain popular figures. It was a small percentage of kids. The entire class and hallway didn't have the whole shoe. Like, yeah, we saw a lot of people eventually over the year, but it wasn't exactly everybody. It wasn't a mass. And like she said, we're not the main people buying the shoe now. Because Asian Americans are definitely a dominant
Right.
force in the reselling collection market shoes. You can just check social media in real life, go to line footage, and you'll see for a Supreme release, like for some Supreme dunks, you're not going to see majority African Americans in the line. You're going to see Asian people, whites, and those are sneaker culture gatherings. Even the trading
Mm-hmm.
gatherings for sneakers, it's not going to be mainly us. Even in majority black cities like Philadelphia, in communities online like KTT, Hype Beast, Super Future, Complex Fashion, those are not marketed towards us in the first place. They use some of our aesthetic to market towards other people. Our main expenditures as a culture are hair care and household needs, according to the data. And The reason why we spend so much
Mm-hmm.
on hair care is due to employment, mainly due to employment, because we want to avoid some of that discrimination. We're trying to offset some of this discrimination. That's one of the reasons why there's so much hair care
Mm-hmm.
expenditure, and also we have the right to do so. That's part of our beautification as a people.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
And with that being said, like I think it's safe to say that with the weaponization of white supremacy on blackness, um, you know, that is another talking point when we say, especially with the Jordan narrative, and then other people, especially black people, using those talking points as a form of black empowerment. Is it safe to say that somehow we don't appreciate who we are as a community, and then also tie that into the ignorance of the data? Because I think that a lot of us don't know the information, so we speak out the side of our necks,
Mm-hmm.
thinking that it's empowering one another and keeping us accountable to something that is actually a farce.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that. I had to turn around real fast.
Totally agree. No. And it's just like an anti-blackness like narrative, and we're going to keep hearing this narrative as we get closer to the holiday season, right? And then, another thing that really upsets me when people are like, well, we
And
got
spending power.
1.5 trillion buying power and spending power, and
Big
y'all
lips.
niggas just need to stop doing this. And you're like, yo, where are you getting your facts from?
Feel good. Feel good
So we're gonna keep hearing this. Yeah, it's the feel goodism.
Yeah. Now speaking of that though, like not to cut you all off, but Dr. Boris Watkins said this. He said that, oh my God, he said that Air Jordans create a trade deficit for blacks. Okay, let's look
Yeah.
at trade deficit. Balance of trade, commercial balance, or net exports, sometimes symbolized as NX. That is the difference between the monetary value of a nation's exports and imports over a certain time period. No, it's a nation. Sometimes a distinction is made between a balance of trade for goods versus one for services. The balance of trade measures a flow of exports and imports over a given period of time. The notion of balance of trade does not mean that exports and imports are in balance with each other.
Mm.
This is why I always say to so many different people that we need to be careful about who
Mm-hmm.
we listen to. Because now, to balance this all off with something that Sandy Darity said, and especially in that report that he did with Duke, he said, nonetheless, the conventional wisdom has it that blacks in search of immediate gratification lack self-control and are plagued uniquely by a culture of frivolous consumerism. This belief was magnified by Ronald Reagan's use of the welfare queen trope during his campaign and recently via internet financial gurus. We're going to tie in Boyce Watkins with the financial guru.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
He's one of those. Pushing images of Black Americans spending money on what? Jordan brand Nike shoes rather than household needs. Thank you, Chief Meta. Yet the empirical evidence indicates that it has not been the case historically, nor is it the case today that blacks are more financially wasteful than whites. In addition to the Gittleman and Wolf 2014 study, economists ranging from arch conservative Milton Friedman to Marjorie Gallinson to Mark Alexis, a founder of the Caucus of Black Economists, all found that blacks have a slightly higher
Those are the big
rate
facts.
than whites.
Big
Right?
facts.
Oh, there are the
you can't
facts,
argue with
baby.
those. They're
Bars.
Big facts, y'all.
Well,
what do you all think about this? Because I'm tired of hearing these Negroes with a platform who spend so much on advertising, even though they ain't really got a true following.
You buying Jordans
down
instead
to
of
us
my classes.
the product.
Of course.
Right?
That's what it is. They want you to spend money
this
on them.
that having a course is A business.
Yeah, they want your
Yeah.
bag. They want the
It,
piece. That's why.
that yeah. They want to get the bag. They want a piece of the
Yeah,
bag
because
too.
there's no results.
They want your bag, making you broker
Right.
than what you are.
It's lit.
So what we gonna do about it? What do y'all think about this shit right here? What do y'all think about it? Let's get real with it. Let's get real. Let's just, you know what? Take the gloves off.
I mean, this is the thing. Yeah, this is the thing. If it was coming from like a white man saying that about black people, we'll be highly offended. But because it's coming from someone who look like us, Boyce Watkins, we're like, oh well, you know what? That may be true.
Right.
I need to look into his trade class. And then I think he also said too, y'all need to buy stocks in Nike. And I just think he just says stuff for sensationalism to be like, yo, my life is shit. I need to like my life. I gotta go support
Called him a
him,
character.
and not knowing like
that,
he's not even being supported himself.
Boyce
He's being
Watkins
supported
and
by
his
an Asian
pro-black
American.
character. I remember that. Woo! Wow.
He's basically saying
Right.
that you useless. You only as
Exactly.
useful as I see you as.
Exactly. I mean, like, I've been stopped listening to Boyce, but there's so many other people who still listen to him and share this. It's just pretty much Boyce is just shaming folks who are,
But,
barely trying to make
if
it.
people don't buy his classes,
he just poor shaming.
Hop on his live and go to his Instagram and he doesn't get any speaking engagements. Well, what will he be?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Or pay $600 for a ticket. All right, we're gonna take another break. All right. We back. All right. So since we've been having such a wonderful discussion on so many different topics here on tonight's on podcast, we're now going to get into it involving conflict marketing, and you all are probably going to find this very interesting. That a lot of you have been feeding into situations, or rather, different marketing practices that. Point in case would be H&M. Point in case would be so many different other topics here that we already discussed, especially involving Jordans and whatnot, that you realize that marketing has been weaponized to get you to talk about, or rather promote, said corporations. So go ahead, Chief Meta, and get into it.
Alrighty. On conflict marketing. And conflict is described as a serious disagreement or protracted argument and an incompatibility. To be a variance. Controversy, which is another part of conflict/controversy marketing, is also defined as a protracted disagreement, usually public and heated. Marketing is the study and management of exchange relationships. Conflict/controversy marketing is a tool marketers use to bring attention to branding campaigns, sometimes under the guise of cause advocacy and awareness, but mainly focused on attracting viewers to a brand by focusing on subjects that certain demographics have public disagreements about, i.e. race, sexuality, gender, nationality, political orientation, and or brand loyalty in conjunction with each other. Examples: the black and white PSP ad from 2006 with the very, very ivory white woman choking a dark-skinned black woman in an aggressive manner. It caused a lot of controversy in the Netherlands where it was aired, and it made an international sensation for a short while during Internet 1.0. And the H&M monkey ad from earlier this year that caused a stir and several people to type H&M several times over and over again saying how much they don't like them. And the Gucci blackface ad, the same. Led to millions of social, no promo for all of them, by the way. I hope we can, erase who I named later on. But
Mm-hmm.
led to millions of social media users giving these. Huh? Yeah, I made a mistake in naming them in the first place. That was
All right, go ahead and drop
yeah,
Hey, go ahead, drop the names. We don't care at this point. Hey, bro, like
right.
at the end of the day, we got to
Good.
stop making the same mistakes when it comes to this whole notion. Like, we fall into the trap of like, especially like what I said before, H and
Mm-hmm.
M. We fell into that trap, right? Did we look at everything and then like
Exactly.
really just sit
Right.
back besides
Advertise.
just like
Share the
reacting,
article.
right? Conflict marketing
Speak
React.
is
about the
definitely a
brand.
tool to
Mm-hmm.
get you to what? Buy
And
more
then
product.
even,
Not
you're
just buy
giving
more
them free
product,
Right.
but also
promotion
what?
outside of
Share
the
this article.
usual rap
Share like
braggadocio and indirect
advertise. You know what I
billboarding
mean?
from
So here
bootleg
we go
versions of
again with
said brand.
warfare.
So even when you take money from them, you're still given that pattern or that name brand recognition when you walk around with it on. So because controversy affects people's willingness to talk, and that's why the marketing is such a sensitive area. Controversial topics are uncomfortable to discuss unless you have some anonymity. And anonymity moderates the relationship between controversy and people's willingness to talk. That's when you go online and you have the free
Mm-hmm.
promotion that people have, and people that represent the other side of a situation will automatically hop in, especially on certain social media platforms where you can use a dog's picture or a sunflower or hide behind shades in a truck. And relationship closeness moderates the relationship between controversy and people's willingness to talk as well. So if you have an influencer that's part of the same demographic as you, they can convince a wide swath of people to complain about a brand while they advertise for it for free. Because you notice that these people never stop
Mm-hmm.
mentioning this brand. They said to stop wearing it, but we don't really have definite proof that they stopped wearing it or buying it because they used to talk about it all day. Who knows? I don't want to sound, like tinfoil hat conspiracy status, but they might be trying to put another barrier to entry in the brand. Like, okay, this is how we get the lowbrow people to stop, and then I'll keep wearing it myself. Either way, it's free advertisement. You might as well make people pay for your time, especially us, because we're vulnerable to that. Let's see.
And we're going to take another short break real quick. We back. We are back in the building now. We were on conflict marketing, and so I got a little piece to read for you all. And Steve Jobs said this, and this is from Knowledge Wharton, actually Wharton University. Sorry about that, guys. Throughout his life and career, Steve Jobs represented himself as a warrior against the forces of evil, his rivals in the marketplace. All right. So, one part of this involving conflict marketing, they are definitely using this as a tool to not only bring attention to whatever products that they might have, but we can look at the conflicts between Apple and also IBM. Another aspect of this is also the world of news. And one can look at news gathering and dissemination in an idealistic manner. It can then be seen almost as an academic exercise, and perhaps it was so in the early days. It was about what? Gathering information, disseminating that information, of course, analyzing, dissecting current events in a rational manner. With that being said, you can also tie that into politics being entertainment and used as a tool of conflict marketing. And since we are on this topic of conflict marketing,
I think people
what are some ways that we can
should
defend
practice no
ourselves
promo,
and
which is if a
against
brand
these tools of marketing?
All right. Well, I think first of all, people should practice no promo. Like with the vast majority of these brands, you can't
I'll cut that
avoid
out.
branding 100%. Like if you like something and you're just into that, go ahead and wear that. But reacting emotionally, like you said, to the negative promotion or the controversy marketing and constantly beating people over the head, like look at them, look at them, look at them. Don't do that. Just ignore them, because that's the one thing that marketing and branding and those advertisement companies don't want. They don't want any dead air. They don't want people to not be looking at them. So if we just carried that along to the ones that made themselves an example and showed that they weren't for us for real, which is the vast majority anyway, then who knows what we'd be able to affect. And maybe we should look more inwardly at our own brands. But that being said, there has to be better logistics and availability. It's not an easy thing to do, especially if you're in an area where you can't find anything, from a black owned brand, so to speak.
True. Yeah, I definitely agree with the whole. I'm definitely agreeing
What do
with
you
the
think?
whole like no promo, and also too like don't discuss it when it's with your social media. Focus on promoting. I always say like the advocacy you're doing, such as reparations, such as just even certain policies you're looking to change on a local level. Because I think a lot of times we get bombarded on a macro level on what the mass media is telling us how to think, what to wear, what to promote, certain brands, and we don't take the time out to look on the local level and say, you know what, like, how can I, affect change? Because this is all also about affecting change as well. Because they're getting the dollars in their pocket, not us, and we're already trying to hold on to the minimum amount of wealth and income that we have and that we don't have, to continuously give it away, and knowing that we're going to be pitted against it. Also, to another thing, if you're going to like boycott something, let's say the film that's coming up about our ancestor, no promo to that in November. Read books about it. Go to the library, purchase a book. There's so many documentaries out here that you can learn about. You don't have to give your dollars to, Hollywood that's going to cast someone who, they may look like us, but don't even have our lineage or don't even know the historical content behind, said ancestor or whatever the case is. So I think we should be more self-aware of what we're putting out there on social media, and also too, even within our conversations with
You just
our
gave me
tribal
an
folks.
idea. If there are black owned venues or easy access or venues you already having access to. During the premiere of the movie, try to sway people from attending that by having a documentary showcase or a poetry event about Harriet Tubman and other figures like Harriet Tubman that are unsung. You feel me? Have readings about Harriet Tubman at the local library. If there are any open areas, try to make that possible. And you might be able to, not in a negative, to use negative terms, but kill two birds with one stone. You'll be able to fulfill two purposes. You'll be educating. You'll be educating and networking at the same time, and you might draw some attendees away from that show.
Most definitely.
I like that idea.
Definitely, I like that too. And since we were talking about no promo, on Twitter the other day, I was saying to some of our ADOS and Foundation Black American brothers and sisters that you don't have to always respond to trolls. Matter of fact, you probably shouldn't engage at all. However, there's also, in terms of like the art of warfare, you can utilize those tactics too, but also there's the no promo function or the no promo strategy of very issues that they want to draw attention to. And I'm not going to mention any names, but there's a certain rapper on Twitter with the blue check getting paid by certain political dollars that loves to try to talk trash about ADOS and also the founders of the said movement, and not even understanding that there's a bigger picture beyond his individual dollars. And if we're going to talk about reparations, we're going to talk about our political issues, let's be honest about it. Let's not try to, curtail and dance around a mulberry bush about it. Let's actually be real about it and be honest in those discussions. Also, there's a certain DJ who is of a certain hue, who's not from the culture, who's known as a culture vulture, wanting to chime in on our reparations discussion, wanting to have an opinion. And he said that, flat out, that he's in favor of it, but in the form of what? He said flat out, education. And that, oh yeah, free education and HBCUs is at the third. But like, bro, like, why are you even in this a discussion?
Right.
So
Just
when
stick to
those
your
people
interview, bruh.
speak
Stick to your
and they
interview
chime in on our
and do your
conversations
thing.
and they have
Leave us to our
negative
thing.
views and they show
You're
they're
not
not
qualified.
for us, they're now referred to as no promo. Certain brands, no promo. And people were like, well, what's no promo? You can figure it out from inferences. You see how much more difficult it is because when you put no promo in their place online, you're not giving them the clicks. You're not giving them the SEO. People can't, there's no residual reminders like, oh, damn, that's right. I remember that person's song. Or I remember that interview with this person. Or I remember when I wore this outfit to this place. Nothing goes there. It's gonna take you a while to figure out. And it removes the value, so to speak, at least in my opinion.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now, we're going to go ahead and take another quick break, and then we can go ahead and close out. All right, we are now back, and it's been a lovely discussion. And thank you all for rocking with us. Go ahead and hit that like button, share, follow, all the above. If there is nothing else to be said, we will definitely be seeing you all on our next discussion. Peace out.